Hi, I'm Dr. David Day of Samurai Digital Security, and this is 404 Cybersecurity Not Found, tearing cybersecurity a new arse since 2015. Hello, I'm David Day, and welcome to our latest podcast or videocast, depending on what medium you are listening or watching in. Today I'm joined by Kieran, and we are going to be talking about SMS, text messaging in other words, and the dangers that it poses to us from a cyber security perspective. I think probably a good place to start is if we consider the history of SMS. It's a very old technology. So it was Vodafone that created the first text message in 1992. So yeah, that was just at the time when I was finishing university. That's how old I am. And probably before you were born, Kieran, I imagine.
Yeah.
The first text message went out. So anyway, SMS, right. So we have this situation where it hasn't really progressed much in terms of how it works for the last 20 years. Is that right, Kieran? Well, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's been built with ancient technology, and it's to keep everything still working. These new improvements that they keep making on 3G, 4G, and the new 5G are having to also work with 2G, GSM, and all the old standards. So it just allows all them old vulnerabilities to creep in without a real proper fix, really.
Right. So my understanding is, that we're kind of moving on in terms of mobile technologies, like the bandwidth that's available, the number of connections that you can have, the fidelity of phone calls, but the underlying infrastructure that's being used for SMS and the protocols hasn't really moved on. Is that right?
Yeah, and you'll see how 3G will be on one network, and once that text message is being sent, if the receiver was on 4G, it still got to traverse through the 3G network, then into the 4G. So it's implementing basically both technologies just to do a simple task of send an SMS.
So am I right in understanding that the problem is with the signaling protocol? It's this Ss7 signaling protocol, isn't it, Kieran? Is that what's causing the problem?
Yeah, so that's like the old standard. That's what 2G and 3G is based on. With 4G, you've got it still has vulnerabilities in it, just like probably most protocols, to be honest. But with that added to it, you're still not fixing the original issue because it always has to go back to the Ss7 network.
Okay, and I've been reading about. I did do a little bit of reading about this Ss7 signaling protocol. This has been around since 1975, which is at a point in time where I just started primary school. It's archaic, to say the least, and I find it remarkable that we're still largely dependent on this Ss7 signaling protocol now. What is the problem, Kieran, with inherently with Ss7? Why should we be concerned that we're still using it?
It was never intended to be open to everyone. The consensus, I think, with this network was the major companies, so Vodafone, Orange at the time, O2, they'd be the only ones with access to it. Since then, the access is now being sold off and you can get access to this network for I think we've seen it quoted at €1,000, and because it's being sent in plain text with no actual lock-in mechanism that can authenticate who that sender is. It's just being abused. Anything can be altered with it. It can be seen, and they've basically just opened all the floodgates to allow anyone. I say anyone. They still need the contacts, but anyone to join this network and view all this information, route messages, and do what they want, really.
Okay. I'm just actually, while you were talking there, I was looking up just had a quick look at a blog, a Kali blog, which is talking about the potential of actually, installing a few tools, within Kali Linux, and then, being able to access the network from there. I have a feeling that maybe another blog, another podcast where we look into that, but it certainly looks like the barrier to entry for accessing the network that's responsible for SMS messaging is pretty meager. The bar is set pretty low in terms of the security around SS7. What are the kind of things that we could, that a malicious party could do to take advantage of that, Kieran?
There's a number of them. I'll talk very briefly on just a few of them. So spoofing, that's the biggest one, to be honest, because the network doesn't check who's sending it. Anyone can post themselves as any phone number, any name, and you can say your name to NHS. Doesn't matter. You can set it. The biggest issue would be the plain text part of it. It not being secure or any and good for anything confidential. Really opens it up for everything you've got to send. Got to be very vague, especially from a company point of view. If they were wanting to deal with anything, it's got to be very vague, and usually would send you to a website, which brings us into the part of a lot of phishing attacks.
I mean, we've actually done this, haven't we, before?
Yeah.
We've got that. We have a sort of when we go to trade shows, etc. We have a tool which allows us to send anybody a text message from anybody. I mean, I remember a particular example where a friend of mine actually said, "Oh, you know what? It'd be really funny if you send my boss a message purporting to be from his boss, telling him to give me a pay rise." He said, "Can you do that?" I says, "Well, yeah." And he says, "Well, do it then." And I said, "Well, I'll get into trouble." He goes, no, the guy will be really cool about it. Don't worry about it. He'll get the joke. So I did. And actually, it didn't go down particularly well with the guy, actually. And he started saying, he emailed my friend's boss and said, "Why should I give him a pay rise and not anybody else? I don't understand." And then he says, the guy said, "What are you talking about?" Right? Because it's not going to go back to the person spoofing, is it? It's actually going to go back to the person who spoofs the message doesn't get the reply. The actual person whose number they've spoofed will get the reply.
Yeah.
So I know we've had some fun with that, and that is all around what you're saying of the fact that SS7 doesn't provide the necessary tools for authentication. There's no verification that you are who you are who you say you are. That your number is the number you're saying it is. So in this particular piece of software I've got, right, there's a bit where you put the number in of the recipient and you put the number in of the person that you're wanting to spoof, right? And you don't even have to put a number in. You can actually put characters in, like a word like Donald Trump, and although the number won't come up, it will say Donald Trump in the text message. And I think the other thing we've done podcasts on this before, and there's I think we also did a video piece on this as well, and I'll put the link to that in the comments underneath this one. But yeah, we've kind of shown some of the ways of how that can be detrimental and dangerous.
Well, it was meant to be a closed-off network, weren't it? Going back to our other point, where that was their authentication method to make sure whoever's sending it is correct, because it was meant to be very guarded, locked down, and only specific companies had access to it. And now that's open.
Right. It's not being used for the purpose that it was designed.
Yeah.
It's being used for a different purpose. It's been shoehorned into this new purpose. And it's not really fit for purpose. I don't think, at least
No.
not in today's age where security is more important. And I think there's a broader point, isn't there? With regard to this, around the fact that we're so used to it now. We've been using it on our phones since 1992, which is pretty much the point where people started to get mobile phones. I mean, I can't remember when I first got a mobile phone, but I think it was probably 1997, 97, 98. It was there or thereabouts, I think, when I got my first a Motorola. No, it was a Sagim. It was a terrible phone, awful, obviously, as you can imagine. And an awful lot's changed since then, right?
Yeah. To go back to your original point, you could put characters in. I've noticed a lot of phishing attacks will have messages from just generic names that you could have someone down in your contacts, like just mum. They wouldn't need your mum's actual phone number, but because it comes up as mum, that looks no different to at the top of your phone, although you've already added her. And if a message was to come from your mum saying, "Oh, have you seen this picture?" You're not going to bat an eyelid. It even opens up to even more attacks.
Well, imagine a scenario where your kid's gone abroad, traveling, and you receive a message from them, and perhaps it's just that says their name, or their full name if you don't know their phone number, or maybe you do know their phone number for whatever reason because it's been posted publicly, and that person's traveling because it's all over Facebook that they're traveling, and then
Yeah.
you send a message through to their parents, to their dad, and say, "I really need some money wiring to me immediately. I'm in terrible trouble." Blah blah blah. That's the kind of scenario where, with a bit of emotion behind it, you can see how that potentially could work, couldn't you? I mean,
Yeah.
we've had a number of these issues already, haven't we? The sort of the COVID-19 relief payments was an example, wasn't it? And there was another one, wasn't there? A Royal Mail one, Kieran?
That one I've actually received myself, and it's very strange how coincidental, when I ordered something and was expecting Royal Mail to be delivering it, I also received it very similar times, and that was again urgent action. You need to pay a shipping fee. That there's going to be consequences if you don't.
And it's made worse by the fact they can actually, I don't know if they did on those cases, but they can actually use the company's real phone number.
Yeah.
So, if you were to look and check, the phone numbers would tally. You think, well, it's going to be legitimate then, right? Because, people are still, unsure as to the fact that it isn't authentic, that it can be done. And that seeing the number in the text message is absolutely no guarantee of authenticity. It's very, very worrying. I mean, we've mentioned COVID-19, we've mentioned the Royal Mail as scams, but what about your bank? Your bank suddenly starts sending you messages. Click on this link, do that, verify the other, and it's coming from your bank's number, right? That's a definite concern, isn't it?
I've noticed it because when we look into phishing emails and phishing text messages, I actually went back to look at my genuine banking texts, because your bank does send you texts if an unusual payment is made. It's, can you confirm this payment, yes or no? It's vague, but to only you and the bank, it kind of makes sense. Like, they'll not show any information. They won't say click on this. It'll usually be, there's been a transaction. If it has been declined, please type yes.
you think part of the problem is the fact that because so many organizations do use SMS as a means to notify and to send messages, that we tend to trust it more?
Oh yeah, I think if people went onto their own, let's say everyone in the world had a smartphone, and it became just common knowledge to get messages through the app, you already know it's like Authenticator because it's through the genuine app, meaning that the text, as soon as you do get a text, you're going to completely ignore it because you're going to say, my bank don't use text. Who uses text nowadays? Once we make the push for a new generation of smartphones and it just becomes the norm, and SMS like email, I think, is also starting to die out. I think that's where we're going to see phishing become a lot harder.
Yeah, 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 or smishing in this case.
Yeah,
So they're talking about they're developing SMS over 5G at the moment, aren't they? At the moment, it's just being
yeah,
used for data. I mean, I'm hoping that might help with things, but of course, we're still in the position where 2G and 3G are being used. So even if somebody was using the technology for 5G, or it's actually improved with 4G a little, hasn't it?
yeah,
With the signaling protocol, I think that diameter, isn't it? It's called that uses.
yeah,
It still has to be backwardly compatible. So if you're sending the message to
yeah.
somebody who's on 2G or 3G, it's still going to be vulnerable to the same problems, right?
Oh yeah, it always comes back to backwards compatibility. It's ease of use. You could always suggest something in replacement, but I think the main argument for most of it is so and so hasn't got a smartphone. They know how to use text. Trying to get them onto this new platform is going to be difficult. To fully get rid of it is going to be very, very difficult. I wouldn't like to be the person to be saying when 3G needs turning off and um,
It's going to have to
getting
happen at
rid.
some point, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I mean,
someone's
then
going to
what
have to
they
make the call.
it's a bit like TV, at some point they turn the analog off and you just turned your TV on, and you just weren't getting that signal anymore.
Yeah,
So, they're gonna at some point they just have to make that decision and say enough's enough now. But I think, the difference, of course, between TV and SMS is the fact that you weren't putting your security at risk by picking up a signal in analog for your television. But of
nah,
course, we are putting people's data at risk, by using SMS. I mean, again, if we move to its use in multi-factor well, rather two-factor authentication, we get a problem then, don't we? Particularly when we consider SIM swapping. So I wonder
yeah.
if you can benefit the listeners or viewers with a quick synopsis of how SIM swapping works, what how the bad guys make use of that particular vulnerability.
Yeah, so this is basically a lot of social engineering is involved. It requires an attacker to first know details of a specific target and call their network up, their network provider, and suggest for whatever reason their SIM card stopped working, they've lost it, they've lost their phone, and they require a new SIM card being sent out to a new address. That address or PO box would be held by the attacker. Once they receive it, the other target's SIM will deactivate. So, given that they'll have a short time frame of when they'll put the SIM in, they'll try and log into an account that they'll already know the username and password for, and once the two-factor authentication token goes out, instead of being sent to the real person, it gets sent to the attacker.
I suppose they could also do this, could they? If they were the other way of social engineering that is saying you're changing your network provider.
Yeah, it comes under the same thing now, and especially with you can text your provider now to change provider to get your pack code and everything. You don't even need to call up. So if you were quick enough and smart enough, you'd be able to spoof your number to be theirs, ask for the pack code, and if you can find a way to intercept that original code, you can then text that code directly back to another provider and say, I'd like to be changed with this, send it to this address.
It's the pack code, isn't it? As soon as you've got
Yeah.
that, your quid's in.
Yeah. And I think, is it pack code, and they require just the name of the network previously?
I've got hold of pack code. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, and I've done it online before, right? Personally,
Yeah.
and there's very little in the way of authentication there. Many of them just rely on the fact that they'll send a message to the old number, or they'll do it that way. But I think if you kicked up enough fuss and threw a bit of emotion behind it, like you really needed the phone, you had an urgent deal coming through, you're losing business, blah blah blah. I think there's a good chance, that you could convince somebody to give you that pack code with a minimum of authentication.
Yeah.
And so there's been a few examples of this being used, hasn't there? And also in combination with the two-factor authentication issue. There was the Jack Dorsey, his Twitter that was done this way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When they hacked his Twitter account.
Yeah, they was able to just log in, get his two-factor authentication. That was SIM swap, if I remember correctly, and just sent it straight to them. There was Linus Sebastian on Linus Tech Tips. That happened to him. Straight away, he rang up his provider, and he was actually quite open about the attack and explained how it happened, because everyone said it was weak passwords and stuff, and with him being very public, there's been a number of times where he's had to change bank cards and stuff just because he left it laying in a picture. You wouldn't have been able to have seen it, but someone was able to get his bank details from that and send it in. And same with this, he's a big high profile target, and a lot of his information is already out there. So someone was able to SIM swap, and he said his service went down, and I think he just assumed it was just poor signal. And it was only until a few times he rang up and said something's happened, had already said, oh no, it's because you had a new SIM card sent out. He stated he hadn't. And again, this is a story going back a couple of years. I think he was even scared of this happening, so he asked them to set up a password to verify it was definitely him before this had even happened. And the social engineers were able to work their way around that.
The power of persuasion, isn't it? You throw a bit of emotion in there and a bit of urgency, and it's incredible what people would do. There's the new one as well, isn't there? Well, relatively recently, I'm sure I read about cryptocurrency as well. A bunch of high-profile members of the public, presumably ones known to have large stores of cryptocurrency, having their, having SMS being manipulated so that you could use it for two-factor authentication to allow them to get access to, presumably, to the digital wallets. Is that right? Did you read about that?
Yeah. So it's the just to clarify a bit more. These are the wallets on the actual exchanges themselves. So this could easily be remediated by changing it, just transferring everything you've got into a Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency you're on, a wallet that you earn, both the public, private key that isn't available online. Once it's generated, that's yours. You can print it off. You can write it down on paper. Paper can't be hacked. Store it in a secure place, or even have a cold storage wallet where it gets stored on. You can get little USB sticks. They're about that big.
Just don't lose them, right?
Yeah, just don't lose them. It's literally get it in a safe at home. Then no one can hack it, because the two-factor authentication doesn't play a part. They need your public and private key. As soon as it's on the exchange, that's where you just need a login for convenience to access your portfolio, your cryptocurrencies.
Wow.
And I
A bit, a bit,
remember
of, a bit of good old-fashioned safe cracking skills are going to be are going to become in demand again if we start
exactly.
going down that route.
I think it's the new generation jumping on cryptocurrency as the norm. But I remember when I jumped on cryptocurrency when it was like Bitcoin was only a couple of grand. It still was seen as pointless, and now everyone's seeing it as like a
Oh,
stock.
Kieran, I remember Bitcoin when people were giving them away. They were borderline worthless. They were pennies. Oh, you could have bought like thousands of them for next to nothing. But I guess, anyway, do you know what? It's a different discussion. But the thing with that, of course, is
Yeah,
when do you bail, right? So you look at that and you think the people I think that would have really benefited would have been the people that had Bitcoin and forgot that they had them. They just completely forgot.
yeah,
And then like several
yeah,
years later, they just stumble across them on an old laptop and go, "Oh, what are these?" And then somebody tells them, and they're like, "Geez, they're going to be." I'm sure the
yeah,
stories out there, right? I'd love to hear about them. If anybody knows any, let me know. But yeah, and
yeah.
also we know all about the horror stories of people who've thrown laptops out. We've ended up with,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Or
somebody,
completely forgot the password.
right? I think somebody said that, didn't they? Didn't they have a Bitcoin wallet where if they got the password wrong enough times, that it would lock them out, and they reached the point where they're actually saying to
Yeah,
people, if you can find a way around this, then I will give you a percentage
yeah,
of the money that we get back. And it was like a few million
yeah,
or something, I seem to recall. But anyway, tales
yeah.
for
And I
another
think he
time.
was on like the sixth. Yeah, he was on like the sixth guess out of seven or something like that.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I don't know, did you ever hear the end of that story? Did he end up getting locked out in the end,
I I actually didn't hear about it. So I think it was quite recently since the boom with Elon Musk and
Mm,
Tesla investing in it.
I don't know. I remember stumbling across it at some point and
Yeah,
thinking what a horrible feeling that must be. I've had something similar but not nowhere near as bad, but where I nearly lost the password for my password manager, and the biometrics stopped working because I must have like
yeah,
clicked the button to say don't use it for some reason. I couldn't remember the, the master password, and all of my passwords are in there. And I
yeah,
was
yeah.
really panicking at one point, and then it was some time had gone past, like days, I think, and then in the middle of the night, I suddenly went, "That's what it is." It came back to me. It was like
That
such a
usually
relief.
is, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the other one I'd like to
Um,
talk about, Kieran, briefly
yeah,
is denial of service. So I mean, there's a lot, right? So
yeah,
we've talked about spoofing, we've talked about SIM swapping, and I know there's others as well. Where you can manipulate routers and pretend to be, signaling masts and stations, all kinds of things. But the other one I thought was quite interesting was denial of service. Can you give us a breakdown of that?
yeah. So the basic form of it is you send a lot of data to congest a service. For SMS, you can do this with free apps, and especially with unlimited text now available, you can just set it to send hundreds, thousands of texts to one person or multiple. The other party who receives it, their phone will just keep continuing to try and process all the messages coming through while your network is queuing them up because they're not getting delivered. And it basically just makes a huge amount of congestion.
Okay. You could do an amplification attack as well, can't you? Or kind of like an amplification attack where you can register somebody else's number with multiple different service providers that
Yeah,
sort of send you messages via SMS. And you register the same number with like thousands of them, automate that and send it to thousands
yeah,
of them. And then, of course, that person will get spammed with those as well, won't they?
yeah. And that'll even then be at absolutely no cost to yourselves. There's loads of scripts out there that will just send a request to places like Pizza Hut, Domino's, all around the world, saying, "I want to sign up for your text messaging mailing list or whatever. Here's my number." Sending all them companies flooding just thousands of messages to one poor user.
And I guess this is the kind of thing in which you could do in combination with, with spoofing and SIM swapping if you wanted to. Well, particularly with SIM swapping, if you wanted to do the two-factor authentication thing to ensure that that you got that two-factor authentication message and the actual real recipient didn't, because from my understanding is that actually the amount of processing power with SMS is considerably more than you might think. So I guess if you were embarking upon other sort of nefarious activities of spoofing or SIM swapping, then the denial of service thing is going to throw could well throw the victim off the scent.
Yeah, and with your phone isn't expecting thousands and thousands and thousands of text messages, so every time it's getting pinged or called, that is using quite a huge process just for that one message. Times that by 1,000, and your phone becomes very inefficient trying to keep up with all these text messages. And I've seen batteries go from full to absolutely dead flat in hours.
Yeah, well, I think we should probably do a podcast or a video session sort of delving into this in a bit more detail, maybe with the odd demonstration. If we can find a way of doing that responsibly, that is. Quick shout out as well to my friends at the NCA and the FBI, who actually were responsible for catching that gang of 8 who were responsible for the 100 million worth of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, stealing as a result of SIM swapping. They did actually get those guys. That's a bit of positive news there.
Yeah.
Shall we move on then? We've talked about some of the problems there, and we've talked about some of what's possible. Certainly haven't gone into it in detail in terms of all the the nefarious activities that people can commit using SMS. But obviously, the reason why it's continued to be popular, despite these pretty horrific, actually, vulnerabilities and weaknesses, is because it's ubiquitous. Everybody's phone can do SMS. It's really easy to use. It's cheap in terms of the messages now are sort of, with most contracts, you're just given them as many as you like. And it's familiar because we've all been using it since, 1992 or whenever you got your first phone. We're still at that position, aren't we, where it's sort of convenience over security with it. And it's a big worry, and there's a number of different actors that could take advantage of this. Just people who just want to be dicks, for want of a better word, taking advantage of it. State-sponsored attackers. Serious organized crime can get involved in this as well. Malicious insiders. There's a whole barrel of different bad guys that can get involved, and I think we really need to be on our guard with this one. And what surprises me the most is that we're not having people publicly getting up and saying this is a terrible idea to be using SMS for anything involving secure messages or authentication. It's just the worst, really awful thing that we're doing by using SMS for validation, for sending your COVID test result. I mean, what? Yeah, I mean, I could quite easily send you, Kieran, right now I think, have you had a COVID test before?
I have, yeah.
That's information everybody can use against you. So
There you
so
go.
I could easily send you a text message from your local hospital to say that there was a mistake with your COVID test and that actually it's positive, and we've spotted some other problems as well. If
Yeah.
if I was to be so inclined, and it would come from your hospital, and no doubt if you saw that message, you might think, I mean, you probably wouldn't now because I've just said that, but you might think, I think there's a good chance you'd respond to that, right?
Yeah, and when you're expecting the text, you won't bat an eyelid. It's like when I was saying about the Royal Mail thing. I looked at the text about the Royal Mail thing and thought, do I have to pay any shipping? And then I saw the URL, and if it were someone who weren't technically minded or just straight away clicked on it, it could be very easy to get just quick information, to be honest, because you're already expecting it. The worst bit would be It doesn't have to be just COVID. Who's to say that?
Cancer,
Yeah,
anything.
and it's used
Well,
to terrorize people.
yeah. What about? So here's the thing. What about your bank, right? So if you send somebody a message from a burner phone, saying, we are from your bank. You're about to receive a 4-digit authentication code from us. This will come from your bank. Please, can you reply to us with with these numbers to confirm your to authenticate with us. And then those guys are
Yeah,
actually trying to log into your online banking, and then they would then get the SMS message sent to them, because as part of the multi-factor authentication, and then they would send it to you, and then you could use it then. I mean, I guess that's a little different because it
yeah,
doesn't involve any spoofing. That's just social engineering. But still, it's one potential method that they could take advantage of SMS.
yeah. And that's a method actually used for the tech support scams. Going a bit off topic, but that's they'd try and go onto your bank and then blank your screen, and then they'll say, "We're gonna send you a 4-digit number or whatever digit number. We need you to tell us over the phone what that is so we can confirm." So the victim gets the text, they tell the scammer will input that into the website on their computer, so it's not coming from a weird IP address or
Mm,
anything like that. The screen's
mm.
blank, they can't see. As soon as that goes through, they can say, "Yep, that's correct." If it doesn't go through, then they can say, "No, that's incorrect. Can you read it out again?"
Yeah, hey, try it again.
So,
That is, yeah, that's a belter, that isn't it?
mm,
Particularly, I mean, and I don't think I'm wrong in saying this as well. But when they phone through to do that scam, they can actually phone through where your phone will recognize the phone number as being from the bank, even though it's not from the bank. You can still do that spoofing of the number, can't you?
yeah, yeah. And you can even get apps on your phone if you were to do it on your phone. It really doesn't take much equipment or even technical know-how to do it.
So shall we now we've destroyed SMS, shall we talk about how some of the things we might be able to do to prevent, being a victim of that kind of criminality?
Yeah,
So do you want to start it off, and I'll just, jump in if anything springs to mind?
yeah. Um, Multi-factor authentication apps don't use SMS. They're really easy to set up, especially if you've got a smartphone. It has a QR code. You scan that QR code, ties your login to your phone, and it will just keep generating passwords, and you just open it. There's Authenticator, which I think is Microsoft.
I
Uh,
like Authenticator. Well, there's two. There's
Authy,
Google. There's Microsoft Authenticator and Google Authenticator.
yeah. So they're really good, really easy to set up. And it keeps all your authentication codes in one place, even better than a text. I'd say use Signal preferably, but I know a lot of people have WhatsApp. WhatsApp, at least you've got the security of the end-to-end encryption. Even the government used it for a COVID like information number that you could text, and it will send you back information about COVID as it's going along, and has a massive banner at the top saying that it's a genuine government account, so you know that it's genuine information.
Yeah, but Kieran, it's owned by Facebook, mate.
And Signal all the way.
So, I mean, I guess the other things that you could do as well is, obviously, don't trust the phone number that's been sent to you via SMS,
Yeah,
because that could well be phony. But what you could do is go online and actually find whoever sent you that message before you respond to it. Make a phone call to the actual organization and say, "Did you send me this message?" Particularly if it contains sensitive information or asks you to perform an action where you could be giving away passwords, credentials, or sensitive information. So go take it out of band, as they say. Find the number, the actual number, the real number of the people that have sent this message, and who the message is purporting to be from, and confirm that is really them.
And ignore Google Ads. That's been a big one. Searching for companies, and the top result, which is a Google ad, will always or sometimes be another scam. That's happened a lot. And this is just good general advice for phishing as well, for emails. If you're getting told, or if someone rings you demanding something, saying something's wrong, you need to transfer this money or you're going to lose your money, say, okay, I will call you back. Can I get your name? They will try and probably keep you on. But if you then ring your bank, let's say, or get their number from the genuine banking website and confirm it, all they're going to say is yes or no. If it's
Might just be worth adding to that, though, that if you're doing that from a home phone, when you pick the phone up to dial the number for confirmation, make sure you hear a ringtone first.
Yeah.
Because there is that scam, isn't there, where they don't hang up on their end, and you'll dial the number, and then they'll pretend they're answering as that person. So they keep the line open, and you think you're making another connection, but you're not. You're still on the same call. So if it's your home number, make sure you So if it's your home number, make sure you hear that dial tone as well. Okay, I don't know about you, Kieran, but I'm hungry, and it's Friday evening, and I want to get something to eat and knock off for the weekend. So I'm going to leave it there now. So I'd just like to say thanks very much, Kieran, for helping out, and your good words of wisdom and your expertise with this SMS podcast. And
thank you.
So I'll say cheerio, and Kieran, do you want to say cheerio?
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Catch you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye. This podcast was brought to you by Samurai Digital Security, purveyors of cybersecurity solutions. Find us at samuraisecurity.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Samurai Security, tearing cybersecurity a new arse since 2015.